The daughter I raised, asked me to share the aisle. I didn't expect this. I, 45M, am currently sitting in my home office, staring at a spreadsheet of wedding costs that seems to grow every time I refresh the page. The flickering cursor on the total cell feels like a heartbeat. I'm feeling a mix of hurt, confusion, and honestly, a bit of resentment that I never thought I'd feel toward my daughter, 23F. I've been in her life since she was 3 years old. I call her my stepdaughter here just for the sake of clarity for all of you reading this, but in my heart, she has only ever been my daughter. There has never been a step in my mind when I looked at her. To understand why I'm at my breaking point, you have to understand the history. I met my wife right after I got out of the military. I was 24, trying to figure out how to be a civilian again, and she was 22, working 2 jobs and raising a toddler alone. Her story was one of those that makes you lose a little faith in people. When she got pregnant at 19, the biological father, let's call him the bio dad, basically checked out. He didn't want the burden, as he put it. My wife's family was very traditional and they essentially turned their backs on her for disgracing them. She had nothing. When I met her, she was exhausted. I remember our first date. She fell asleep for 10 minutes at the table because she had worked a double shift and then spent the afternoon at the park with her daughter. I didn't see a burden. I saw a woman with incredible strength and a 3-year-old girl with the brightest eyes I'd ever seen. We married 6 months later. I remember the wedding, a small courthouse thing, and I remember holding that little girl during the vows. I wasn't just committing to my wife, I was committing to her. For 20 years, I have been the one. I was the one who woke up at 3 a.m. when she had the croup. I was the one who sat on the floor and learned how to braid hair by watching YouTube videos because my wife was at work. I was the one who stood in the rain at every soccer game, the one who paid for the braces, the one who taught her how to change a tire, and the one who moved us halfway across the country when a better job opportunity arose that would allow her to go to a better school district. The bio dad? He was a ghost who appeared on a schedule. He didn't even show up until she was 2, and that was only because the state of California forced his hand with child support. When we decided to move out of state when she was 6, we did everything right. We went to court, we got the approval, and we actually sat him down. I told him, look, I know we're moving, but I don't want you to be a stranger. If you want to fly out here outside of the court-ordered summers, the door is open. We won't even ask for travel costs, we just want her to have you. He never came. Not once. In 17 years, he never hopped on a plane just to see her for a weekend. He is a postmaster for the USPS. He makes a very comfortable living, likely close to 6 figures. It was never a money issue. It was an effort issue. My daughter would go to his place for the summer, and I'd get phone calls from her crying because he had left her with his parents while he went out with friends or worked overtime. Despite all that, I never badmouthed him. I followed the step-parent rulebook to a T. I encouraged her to call him. I helped her pick out Father's Day cards for him. I swallowed my pride when she'd come home talking about him, even though I was the one doing the heavy lifting. I figured as long as she was happy, I could play the supportive second role. When she got engaged 6 months ago to a great guy, I was over the moon. The first thing she did was come to me. We sat on the back porch, and she asked, Dad, will you walk me down the aisle? I'm a military man, I don't cry easily, but I had to look away for a second. It felt like the last 20 years were finally being acknowledged in the way that mattered most. We started planning immediately. My wife and I wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. We went dress shopping 2 months ago. If you've never been wedding dress shopping with a daughter, it's a marathon. We spent 6 hours at a boutique. When she finally stepped out in a beautiful lace gown, she looked at me in the mirror and whispered, I feel like a princess, Dad. I didn't even look at the price tag. I handed over my credit card. It was $3,200. I was happy to pay it. We were looking at a total budget of around $40,000. My wife and I have been saving for this since she was 10. We were prepared to cover almost everything because we wanted her to start her married life without debt. Last month, she went back to California to visit the bio dad and tell him the news in person. I thought it was a nice gesture. I even told her to give him my best. When she came back, she was different. She was quiet, fidgety, and avoided eye contact with me for the first 2 days. Finally, on Sunday night, we were all in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. I talked to my other dad, she said, her voice small. I nodded. How did he take the news? He's happy. But, he's really hurt, Dad. He said he's been crying because he realized he won't be the one walking me down the aisle. He said it's his right as my biological father and that he feels like a guest at his own daughter's wedding. I felt a cold sensation in my chest. Okay, and what did you say? I told him I'd think about it. And I have. I was thinking, What if you walk me down the first half of the aisle, and then he meets us halfway, and he walks me the rest of the way to the altar?" The silence that followed was heavy. I looked at my wife, who was gripping a dish towel so hard her knuckles were white. "The first half?" I asked. "So, I'm the opening act, and he's the headliner?" "It's not like that," she insisted. "It's just a way to honor both of you. He says he's missed so much and this is his chance to finally be my father publicly." "He missed so much because he chose not to show up," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "I offered him an open door for 17 years, honey. He never walked through it. I was the one who walked through every door for you." Then we got into the logistics. I asked her what the bio dad was planning to contribute to this public fatherhood moment. "That's the other thing," she said, looking at the floor. "He told me he's in a really tight spot. Apparently, his mortgage is underwater, and he has some credit card debt. He said he literally has nothing in his savings. He asked if we could still cover the wedding because we're more established." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He wanted the glory, the photos, the dance, and the giving away of the bride, the most symbolic part of the ceremony, but he wanted me to pay for the venue, the food, the flowers, and the dress. "So let me get this straight," I said. "He wants to swoop in at the 50-yard line, take the credit, and have me hand him the girl I raised, all while I foot the bill for his redemption moment?" "He's my father," she yelled. "Why are you making this about money? You've always told me that you didn't care about the money." "I don't care about the money when it's for you," I replied. "I care about the money when it's being used to facilitate a man who is essentially using you to look good in front of his friends and family without doing any of the work. If he wants to be the father of the bride, he needs to act like one. That includes the responsibility, not just the spotlight." I told her then and there, "I love you. I will always be your father. But I am not going to pay $40,000 to be a secondary character in a story I wrote the chapters for. If he is walking you to that altar, then he needs to be the one paying for the ceremony. If he's too broke to help, then he needs to accept that he's a guest. You can't have it both ways." She lost it. She accused me of being transactional and said that I was throwing my wealth in her face. She said that the bio dad is fragile right now and that I'm being a bully because I know I have the upper hand. She left that night to stay with a friend. My wife and I have had several long, painful talks since then. My wife is heartbroken. She knows I'm right on principle, she remembers the years of silence from him better than anyone, but she says, "Is this the hill you want to die on? Do you want to risk her not having you there at all?" But that's the thing, I'm not the one risking it. She is. She's the one who is willing to push aside the man who was there for 20 years to appease the ego of a man who couldn't be bothered to call on her birthday half the time. I feel like if I give in now, I'm telling her that my love and my presence are worth nothing. I'm telling her that fatherhood is just a biological fluke and not a decades-long commitment of time, money, and soul. I haven't canceled the checks yet, but I haven't signed the new ones either. The florist called yesterday for a deposit, and I told them I'd call them back. I'm waiting for her to come home so we can talk like adults, but she's only sending me one-sentence texts about how disappointed she is in me. The bio dad hasn't reached out to me, of course. He's letting a 23-year-old girl fight his battles for him, which is exactly the kind of man he's always been. Am I the asshole for standing my ground? Should I just swallow the bitterness, pay the $40,000, and walk my half-aisle with a smile on my face for the sake of her happiness? Or is it time she realizes that dad is a verb, not just a noun? Update. I didn't expect to be back here this soon, and honestly I wish I wasn't. The last few weeks have felt like watching something I spent 20 years building get slowly taken apart piece by piece while I stood there holding tools no one wanted anymore. A lot has happened since my last post, and I'm still trying to process how things escalated this far, because the situation isn't just about the wedding anymore. It's about who my daughter has decided I am to her, and apparently that answer changed overnight. After she left to stay with her friend, communication stayed minimal for several days. Short texts. Cold responses. Mostly logistics about picking up clothes or mail. I gave her space because I thought emotions were running high and she just needed time to cool down. I truly believed we would eventually sit down and talk like we always had. We've disagreed before in life, about curfews when she was younger, about college choices, about boyfriends, but we always found our way back to understanding each other. This time felt different from the beginning. There was a distance in her messages that didn't feel temporary. It felt rehearsed, like she had already decided what role I played in her story and was sticking to a script. About a week after she left, she came over to talk. My wife was home, and we sat at the kitchen table where we've had thousands of ordinary family conversations. Nothing about it felt ordinary. She didn't ease into the conversation. She came in already defensive, already angry, like she'd been building momentum somewhere else before arriving. The first thing she said was that she had spoken to her biological father again and that he was heartbroken and humiliated by my reaction. I told her calmly that my issue was never about humiliating anyone, it was about fairness and respect. I tried to explain again that I wasn't refusing to support her wedding, I was refusing to bankroll a symbolic moment that erased 20 years of reality. That's when the conversation shifted in a way I honestly never imagined possible. She looked directly at me and said her biological father was a better man than I was because he didn't attach money to love. She said real fathers don't keep score, and that I was proving I only valued what I'd spent on her instead of loving her unconditionally. Hearing that felt like getting punched in the chest. Not because she disagreed with me, but because she rewrote my entire role in her life into something transactional and cold. I tried to respond carefully. I reminded her that I never asked for repayment, never demanded recognition, never even corrected her when she called someone else dad during summers despite how much it hurt. I told her this wasn't about money, it was about being asked to step aside emotionally while still carrying all the responsibility. She cut me off and said something I don't think I'll ever forget. She said her biological father never tried to buy love, while I apparently needed financial control to feel important. She said maybe the reason he stayed distant was because he respected her independence, unlike me, who always needed to be involved in everything. According to her, I made myself the center of her life because I needed validation. It didn't even sound like my daughter talking anymore. It sounded like someone had been feeding her interpretations of her childhood that painted me as some controlling outsider who inserted himself where he didn't belong. My wife lost her composure at that point. I've seen my wife angry maybe 3 times in 20 years, and this was one of them. She stood up and told our daughter she needed to stop immediately. She said, very clearly, that I was not just a stepdad and never had been. She reminded her who stayed up during fevers, who coached practices, who worked overtime to pay tuition, who drove cross-country when she was scared to move for college orientation. She asked her, point blank, how she could sit there and say such cruel things to the man who raised her when her biological father chose absence for most of her life. My daughter didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. She said maybe everyone had lied to her growing up and maybe she was finally seeing things clearly. She said blood matters, and that no matter how much time passed, I was still not her real father. Then she added that maybe I should have remembered that before trying to control her wedding. I don't remember everything I said after that because I was honestly stunned. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't angry in the explosive sense. I just felt hollow. My wife was crying, asking her how she could say something so shameful, asking if she understood how deeply hurtful her words were. My daughter accused her mother of choosing me over her and said we were both manipulating her emotionally. Then she left again, slamming the door hard enough to shake the picture frames in the hallway. I thought that would be the lowest point. I was wrong. A few days later, a coworker approached me quietly and asked if everything was okay at home. Apparently, my daughter had posted online about the situation. She didn't name me directly, but anyone who knows us could piece it together instantly. She described me as a wealthy, controlling stepfather trying to punish her for wanting a relationship with her real dad. She claimed I threatened to cancel her wedding because I couldn't handle not being the center of attention. People started reaching out. Extended family members. Old friends. Even neighbors. Some asked gently what was going on, others were noticeably colder. It became clear she had been telling a version of events that painted me as vindictive and emotionally manipulative. The worst part wasn't strangers forming opinions. It was realizing she was actively trying to damage my reputation to strengthen her argument. She began messaging relatives, saying I had always resented her biological father and that I finally showed my true colors. A cousin forwarded one of the messages to my wife because it made her uncomfortable. Reading it felt surreal. The man described in that message wasn't me. It was a caricature built from resentment and revisionist history. My wife called her immediately after seeing it. That conversation lasted nearly an hour and ended with my daughter accusing her own mother of being brainwashed. My wife told her she should be ashamed of trying to publicly humiliate the man who raised her. She said love isn't proven by biology alone and that respect matters. She told her plainly that cruelty doesn't become truth just because it's spoken loudly. My daughter responded by saying she was finally standing up for herself after years of emotional pressure. At that point, something in me shifted. Not anger, clarity. I realized I couldn't force someone to acknowledge a relationship they no longer wanted. I also couldn't keep financing a situation where I was being portrayed as the villain while quietly funding everything behind the scenes. So I made a decision. I paused every remaining wedding payment. Not out of revenge, but because continuing would mean accepting the narrative she created, that I existed only as a wallet attached to obligations she no longer respected. I informed my wife first, and she supported me completely. She said she never imagined our daughter could become this hostile, but she agreed that enabling the situation would only reinforce the behavior. Word reached my daughter quickly. She sent a series of angry messages accusing me of proving her right. She said her biological father would never do something like this because he loved her without conditions. She also said she'd rather have a small wedding funded by people who truly loved her than a large one controlled by someone who needed recognition. That hurt more than I expected, not because of the insult itself, but because it erased 20 years of shared life like it meant nothing. Since then, the smear campaign has continued. Social media posts, passive-aggressive comments, stories implying emotional abuse without ever stating facts. Some people believe her. Some don't. I've chosen not to respond publicly because arguing online with someone I raised feels like crossing a line I never wanted to approach. The house has been quiet. My wife grieves in a way I don't think people talk about enough, grieving someone who is still alive but behaving like a stranger. She keeps saying she doesn't recognize the person our daughter has become. I don't either. I still love her. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect or rewriting reality to make someone else comfortable. Right now, there is no wedding planning happening here. No spreadsheets. No vendor calls. Just silence where excitement used to be. I don't know how this ends. Maybe she'll realize someday how much damage was done. Maybe she won't. What I do know is that fatherhood, at least the version I believed in, was never supposed to become a competition measured by biology or public perception.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.